All right, folks, how we doing? We are going to dig into the next family of instruments here, and that is going to be the brass family. So, remember, families of instruments are groupings of instruments that are similar to one another. They are not exactly the same, but they are similar enough that they work really well together, and they all produce similar sounds. Just like any other family, the families of instruments don't all exactly sound the same. They don't all exactly work the same, but they are very, very similar to one another. So the brass family is going to refer to pretty much any instrument that is made of metal and uses a mouthpiece to produce the sound. So the mouthpiece is what I've got right here in my hand. So this is one of my trumpet mouthpieces. And each of the mouthpieces that we have is going to have some similar characteristics. Now, obviously, it's because it's in a family, so that means that they're going to have some similar characteristics to one another. So the mouthpiece is all going to have a very similar makeup. So what we've got is we've got the rim right here, which is the top part right here, where the lips are going to rest on the mouthpiece. So when you put the mouthpiece up to play, the lips rest on the rim of the mouthpiece. So we also have what's called the shank down here, which is where the mouthpiece goes into the instrument. Looking through there, right there it is, we have something called the back bore, which is what is the opening, the size of the tubing that is going into the mouthpiece. And then on the other side, with the light, it's a little hard to see, we've got something called the cup. The cup is what is that rounded part that is going to produce the buzz that we want. Now, our lips are what makes the buzz, but the mouthpiece is going to allow that to go into the instrument and be amplified to produce the sounds that we want. When you play the mouthpiece by itself, because I know some of you are wondering what it sounds like, we've got a kind of strange sort of sound. Now, obviously, that's not the same sound as the brass instruments, but we'll get into what they actually sound like in just a few minutes here. So let's dig in to the brass family, see what we got. We're going to start with the highest pitched instrument, which is going to have the smallest tubing, the least amount of tubing. So we've got the trumpet. The instrument is played in many different ways and many different kinds of trumpet. You can see on the screen here that we have a lot of different types of trumpet that you can use. All trumpets are going to have very similar characteristics, though. They're going to be made up of tubing, and they are going to have 3 valves. Now, the valves are going to move up and down, and that is what's going to produce the different pitches that we're going to play. By moving the valves up and down, you're going to activate different segments of tubing, which is what's going to produce those different sounds. So the trumpet is the highest of the brass instruments, meaning that it has the shortest and smallest tubing. So let's discover what the trumpet is going to sound like. This is a woman by the name of Alison Balsam. She's a trumpet soloist, and she is going to be performing a little bit of the Hummel Trumpet Concerto, third movement. So now, obviously, she was playing a lot of really fast, shorter notes. However, the trumpet can play many different styles. They can play those longer melodies. They can play the fanfares. They can play those very fast kind of sort of melodies that you just heard. So it's a very versatile instrument. It's an instrument that can do a lot of different things. Moving on here, we have the horn. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to this as the French horn, but typically in bands, we just call this horn. It was originally used as a hunting instrument. So back in the day when people hunted all the time for their food, what they would do is they would have very specific calls to tell other hunters where to go. The horn was later incorporated into the into the orchestra, because it's got a very unique sound and a rather large range. So something to note, French horns have piston valves, very much like the trumpet. You can see that up in the top corner right here. German horns have the rotary valves, which is what is used today. So we've got those rotor valves rather than the piston valves. So this is going to be an example of a French horn sonata, and we're going to just kind of hear what this sounds like. I believe this is Beethoven, if I remember correctly. Or it'll go to the next slide. Sorry, folks. Here we go. Yeah, the Beethoven sonata for horn and piano. So as you can hear, the horn can play some really high sounds, but it also has a really low range too. If I remember correctly, I believe horns have 4 full octaves that they can play in, which means that they get 4 versions of each different note as they progress from low to high. So moving on here, we have an instrument called the trombone. And the trombone is one of the only brass instruments that doesn't have any valves. So it is played by moving the slide to a very specific length. And what that does is it produces the same effect as a valve, but uses a slide, which gives it a little bit of a different sort of sound. So it does have some pretty unique sounds and abilities, and we're going to hear what this trombone sonata, concerto, whatever it is, sounds like. So here we go. Let's take a listen. So the trombone can play some really fast notes. It takes a really precise slide to be able to do those different sorts of things. So really unique sort of sound to it. Hopefully you can hear that most of the brass instruments sound very, very similar to one another and all produce similar sorts of sounds. So we're going to get to the second largest instrument called the euphonium. So a little bit of a funny name, but it is the euphonium. So it sometimes takes the place of a trombone because it plays very similar in the range. However, the sound of the euphonium is softer and rounder than that of the trombone. So rather than being a little bit more direct and in your face, the euphonium is a little bit of a rounder, kind of more gentle sort of sound. So it is a little bit larger. It is the second lowest sounding brass instrument. So we're going to listen to this euphonium solo. So a really neat sound. It sounds very similar to the trombone. However, it is quite a bit rounder and warmer sort of sounding rather than being as in your face and direct as the trombone is. So last but not least, we have the largest of the brass instruments, and one of my favorite to play. It is the tuba. So the lowest voice of the brass instruments, it has a very distinct sound. It's kind of this big reverberating sort of sound that you hear kind of working its way through the ensemble. It is the foundation of all the different sounds that we hear in the ensemble because it is the lowest and the biggest and fullest one. So this is a tuba concerto, which doesn't happen very often, but this is a really cool example of it. So here we go. So really unique for a tuba solo. And one of the things I love about this solo is that really, really fast playing towards the end of the excerpt that we listened to. So most people think tuba plays those really big, full notes, which it does. But it can also play some really, really cool melodies. So the last thing I want to touch on here, folks, is really just more of a kind of cool thing for you to listen to. This is the brass ensemble. So ensemble is made up of many different combinations of instruments. Woodwind ensembles exist, brass ensembles exist too. Sometimes they are a quintet, which is 5 instruments. Sometimes it's all like instruments, which is a choir. Sometimes it's a quartet, things like that. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to actually turn my video off here, and I just want you to listen to a good portion of this. This is Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, and it is one of my all-time favorite pieces. If you do have some good quality speakers or you've got some headphones that you can plug in and stuff, go ahead and really get into this because it is a gorgeous sound of all of these brass instruments playing. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to make myself disappear right now. And we're just going to go ahead and listen to Elsa's. So, like I said, one of my all-time favorite pieces, not only for orchestra, but as a brass ensemble as well. Hopefully, as you were listening to that, you could hear all the different voices in there, the trumpets sitting on top of everything, the horns, tubas, trombones, euphoniums, all of that stuff building into that massive sound that you heard at the very end. All right, folks, let's go ahead and continue on with our lessons. And very good job today. Thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your day.